Okay, so get this. Looks like we're going deep on like everything today. Politics, food, even some pretty big existential questions. Someone's been busy.
You know, it's funny how these searches all connect, right? Like 1 minute we're talking about the future of humanity on ours, and the next we're debating the merits of Dutch versus American coffee.
Hey, never underestimate a good coffee debate, right? But yeah, you're right. We've got some heavy hitters in the mix this time. And speaking of heavy hitters, we've got to talk about those political hot topics. You know, the ones that have been blowing up online.
Ah, yes. The wild west of internet information. Easy to get lost in the sauce there. Speaking of which, one search really jumped out at me. It must be true. I saw it on Facebook.
Oh boy, the infamous Facebook fallacy. I think we've all been there.
Mm-hmm.
But for our listener who maybe hasn't, can you break that one down for us?
Sure thing. Basically, it's this idea that just because something's, floating around on social media, it's got to be true. And we see this all the time, right? Misleading headlines, out of context quotes, the works.
Exactly. It's like that game of telephone we used to play as kids. The information gets passed around and distorted along the way until you're left wondering what the original message even was.
And a perfect example of this is the whole pro-abortion after birth controversy.
Oh, yeah. That one was really something. Suddenly it seemed like everyone was talking about it, but when you actually looked into what the governor was trying to say,
it was a completely different story. The real issue was about those incredibly rare and often tragic cases where a baby is born with, severe health problems, often ones that are sadly not compatible with life.
Heartbreaking situations. And the governor was trying to address, those specific scenarios, not advocating for casual abortion up until birth, which is unfortunately how it got spun by, certain corners of the internet.
And that's the danger of these, let's call them information traps. A complex issue gets reduced to a simplified, often inflammatory soundbite, and boom, it spreads like wildfire.
And it's not just on one side of the political spectrum either. You also search about Biden and him claiming that he, quote, never spoke to the Fed chair. Now, technically,
in one very specific context, it might have been true. But as we all know, the full story is a bit more nuanced, shall we say.
Bit of an understatement there. I mean, they might not have had like a casual phone chat every week, but they were definitely communicating directly or indirectly about, the economy and all that jazz.
Exactly. It's a classic example of how a statement can be technically true, yet still misleading.
A half-truth is often a whole lie or something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah.
So how do we, as savvy information consumers, avoid falling into these traps? Critical thinking, my friend. Who's presenting this information? Why? What's the context? Don't be afraid to do a little digging, especially when it comes to hot-button topics.
Question everything.
It's amazing how these information traps, they can pop up anywhere, 1 minute it's politics, the next it's, your dinner plate.
Speaking of dinner plates, you've got some interesting food-related searches in here. And I got to say, some of them have me a little, concerned about the stereotypes floating around out there.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, white people eat only meat. Come on now. And don't even get me started on Southerners only eat cheese. Like, seriously.
It's like we're back in grade school, trading those ridiculous, jokes, right? Except not so funny when you realize these stereotypes can actually be pretty harmful,
Totally. Like Southern food, it's amazing. It's got history, culture, flavor. To boil it down to just cheese disrespects a whole region's culinary traditions.
It's about appreciating the nuances, right? Speaking of nuances, you also asked, my dog can poop more than my cat.
What can I say? You're a curious soul, but you might be onto something there. Dogs, generally speaking, tend to, produce a bit more output. Probably something to do with their diet and all.
So if you're constantly dodging landmines in your backyard, you can officially blame it on Fido's efficient digestive system. Glad we could provide that crucial insight.
Anytime. And hey, while we're comparing our furry friends, you also tacked into a classic parenting quandary. Is the first daughter smarter than the second?
The age-old birth order debate. I'll admit I've wondered about that one myself. Is there any actual science behind that, or is it just, parents stirring the pot?
Well, there has been some research on birth order and intelligence, and some studies suggest that firstborns do tend to score slightly higher on IQ tests, but and this is important, it's just an average. It doesn't mean your second child is destined for like a life of remedial classes or anything.
So no need to break out the IQ test at the dinner table. Every kid is different. Every family is different, right?
Exactly. Celebrate the differences.
Speaking of things that make us different, let's talk about the cost of college. Big topic in your searches lately, and for good reason. It's a jungle out there.
Tell me about it. It's a huge investment, and the rising cost of tuition is a real concern for a lot of people. No wonder you're feeling overwhelmed. It's a lot to process.
Definitely. Whether you're staring down those tuition bills right now, saving for your kid's future, or just like drowning in student loan debt yourself, it's a lot to handle. But hey, let's not get bogged down in the financial doom and gloom just yet. You've also been pondering some of life's bigger questions. The ones that keep you up at night.
The mysteries of the universe. Always a good time.
You seem particularly curious about what happens after we die. Searches for heaven and hell tell me you're exploring different beliefs and trying to wrap your head around the great unknown.
Well, yeah, it's a question that's been around since, forever. It's only natural to wonder about these things. And it's important to remember there's no one right answer that's going to work for everyone, Different cultures, different religions, they all have their own ways of thinking about the afterlife.
And for some people, finding meaning in this life, in the here and now, that's enough. It's not about what comes next, but about making the most of the time we have.
I can get behind that. But your quest for answers didn't stop there. You also wondered if maybe, just maybe, blasting off into space might solve all our problems. Is going to Mars the answer?
It's a tempting thought, isn't it? Like, what if we could just hit the reset button and start over on a brand new planet? But I got to ask, is it realistic? And more importantly, is it the right thing to do?
That's the $1,000,000 question, right? It sounds exciting on paper, this whole multiplanetary species thing. But the reality is Mars is not exactly, a welcoming environment.
It's one thing to dream about colonizing another planet. It's another thing entirely to figure out the logistics, the cost, and whether it's even ethical. I guess it's that thing in us, that need to explore, to push the limits, even when we haven't figured out everything about, our own backyard.
Exactly. That drive to discover, to see what's over the next horizon. It's in our DNA, I think.
Speaking of horizons, you also typed in a search that, it kind of stopped me in my tracks. Death will happen.
Heavy stuff, right. But then right alongside that, almost like you're mirroring that big, scary unknown, you search for information about the Earth and get this, falling through space.
Now that you mention it, those two searches together, it's like, I don't know, like you're feeling the immensity of everything on a personal level and like a cosmic level all at once.
I think you've hit on something there. Both those searches, they kind of put us in our place, don't they? The sense of constant motion, these forces so much bigger than us, just carrying us along.
It's like we're all just passengers, on this big blue spaceship hurtling through the void.
And maybe that's the best we can do. Embrace the mystery, question what we think we know, and, just appreciate the ride.
Find those little aha moments in the midst of it all and never stop searching for answers, right?
Absolutely. After all, who knows what other fascinating questions are waiting out there for us to uncover.
That's the beauty of it, right? Always more to learn, more to explore. So to everyone listening, keep those searches coming. You never know where they might lead us. Until next time, keep those brains buzzing.